Hello, my loves, and thank you so much for joining me today on this special episode that I have with a very special guest of mine. Her name is Gia, and she is a mindful reparenting coach. And this episode, I think, is a really special one because there is so much work that needs to be done in terms of reparenting. And I feel so honored to have Gia here so that we can start talking about this topic. Gia, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So, how did you get into this? This is so interesting and so different. I'm so interested.
I got into it because of my personal story, and I saw the dramatic changes that it had in my life and the relationships around me that I decided that I must I must spread the message. I must help others because we grew up being told that life is hard.
Yeah.
You have to work hard. You have to be satisfied with what you get. And we dream about, like the things that we want in our life. And we're always told that it's a dream or it's a fantasy. And that is not true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just within your reach.
I love that. Now you talked a little bit about your story. Would you mind sharing with us exactly what sort of things you had to overcome when you had to kind of reparent yourself, right? And just FYI, people, I think that we all are going to have to do this. This is work that every adult is going to have to do and actually release some of those I don't want to say bonds, but I think release some of the sincere cut that. Let's go with your answer. But would you mind just sharing exactly what you had to overcome to kind of get to a place where you are now?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up, I'm a daughter of an immigrant family. I'm the only child. And
And
I,
can I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for the people that cannot see her, you are Chinese, which I
I'm
think
Chinese.
matters quite a bit.
Yes,
Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
It does. I was born in China and I came to the United States when I was 11. I lived through quite a few traumas in my life, including the move. And my home was violent. There were verbal abuse, physical abuse, and um, so psychological abuse, emotional neglect, all of these things. So I grew up in the States and I had no idea who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like within myself I did, but I didn't at the same time. It was just so confusing. So I left home after high school and I moved to New York City, went to school there, stayed there, and just explored on my own. And I really, really hold lots of gratitude to that place because if it wasn't for New York, I probably wouldn't, a large part of me would probably still not, be not healed or not processed and whatnot. Um, but then I moved on to Europe and then I got married. And my marriage broke. And I came back to California decades after with a daughter. And by the time I came back, I had nothing left. And I moved back into my parents' house, which is the exact place that I have been running away from,
Yeah, that's what
avoiding.
I was just thinking in my head. I was like, and how did that feel to kind of be in a position to have to go back there, knowing the environment that it was?
Fear, a lot of
Yeah,
resistance, feeling that I have failed. And, I did everything I could to avoid coming back to this house, but I had nowhere else to go. And I
yeah,
had a child that I need to support. So, I was forced. to take up more responsibilities. And at that time, I was pretty much like a shell. I remember coming back to my parents' house and going through my old boxes, stuff from high school and things like
Yeah.
this. And I saw some old photos of me and I couldn't even recognize the person in the photo because it's just, there was nothing left in me.
Mm.
So that started my journey of healing myself. And I had no idea what's involved,
I don't
you
think
know?
anyone does.
No.
When people just go in and they're like, okay, I'm just going to work on me. I'm going to do me. I'm going to just heal myself. Like, it's not cute. It's not
No,
pretty.
it's ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's ugly. It's hard. It takes a lot of discipline, but it's also really, really, really rewarding. If someone says parenting is rewarding, self-healing is very, very
Yeah.
rewarding,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's when you realize that you actually have so much power in yourself, that you are the only person that can do all this work to heal yourself.
Yeah.
Everything, all the help you're seeking outside, it's just a guidance. But if you don't do the work, none of those things will work, right?
Yeah. So we talked about it being ugly. When it's, how was it ugly for you?
Well, this is a very important part of my realizations, is that we, each one of us is responsible for something, which is called co-creation.
Yeah.
We all play a part into the dynamics of our relationships. It's not, I'm a good person, that person is a bad person.
Mm-mm.
He's a narcissist, I'm an empath. No, there's no such thing. It's empath, you know, is also narcissistic in their own way. And, there's this like codependency and this kind of like being a victim that is part of playing that role. So when I understood that,
Yeah.
it changed everything for me. So at the beginning, of course, I was just, reading and listening to podcasts and doing whatever I can. And I looked down on my parents. I despised them.
Mm.
I've always despised them because I resented them because of my childhood. And then I looked down on them. I thought I was better because I was doing the work, and they're not. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I know something you don't. I'm better than you,
Yes.
this kind of stuff. But then when I understood the co-creation part, that lifted everything up, and I was able to release all the resentment that I have been holding for decades,
Yeah.
because I was able to see them as human beings,
Yes.
not perpetrators. That to understand that they are the way they are is because they were parented that way.
Mm-hmm.
They had lived through horrible experiences during their childhood that caused them to have certain triggers and reactions and this and that, which, and how I understood how I played into the dynamic of our relationship. And I'm just using my parents and me as an example, but I played the victim every time.
How?
I always, said bad things like my dad this, my mom this, my dad that. But by playing a victim, I was already playing a role that, creates this cause and effect,
Yes.
co-creating this never-ending dynamic.
Yeah.
Until I realized that, I was able to stop co-creating, take responsibility for my own actions, and once somebody stops playing that role, then the entire, the pathways is going to change.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's really important for us to understand that why we're talking about this. We're talking about this because the way that you interact with your parents is the same energy you're going to bring to your romantic relationships,
Yes.
right? So in your Chinese, household, right? And you were being told probably what to say, what to do, right? How to be perfect and all of this other stuff. I guess the book of Tiger Mom is real, very, very fucking real.
It's real.
It's very real that you're going to bring that energy to your romantic relationships, right?
Yes.
And if you're used to this approval of your parents and needing that, or used to having that, that's also going to play a part in the way that you're interacting with the men or women that you're dating, or you know, connecting or co-creating with, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful word,
Yes.
co-creating.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about that a little bit later. But I want to talk about, because I think there might be some people that are listening that first, I think we need to like just go back to the basics and really just talk about, what does reparenting mean exactly?
So we have many different parts of ourselves, actually. We have the inner critic. We have, that critical voice that comes in whenever you want to do
Yeah.
something. That's a part of ourselves that is not us. It's, things that we learned while growing up. And we have our inner child, which is all the wounds, the pains, and the traumas that we experienced during our childhood. And the inner child is created, when as a child, we are forced to be something that we're not. We are imposed upon, molded into, whether it's parental or societal or cultural,
Yes.
all of these things. Then, that feeling, that unbearableness, the pain of not being able to be who you truly, truly are, it becomes like this just gaping wound that as you grow, whenever something happens that can trigger, um that can, you know trigger that old memory to enter your mind again, that's what the inner child is.
Yeah.
It's every, as an adult, you are, can we cut that and start over?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Okay.
So I wanna first talk a little bit about reparenting, and then we'll get into inner child, okay? Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to break it back down, because I think that there are some individuals that may not know exactly what reparenting and reparenting yourself specifically means. So what is reparenting?
Reparenting is looking at the way how you embody your energy, all parts of yourself, how you bringing yourself into an environment, whether if it's, just an environment, or whether it's a relationship with someone. And you look into it, how you bring yourself into that environment. How are your being influencing or affecting another?
Yeah.
And you want to see if you're being present, or if it's hurting others, or you're not happy, and all of these things. And if you can be aware and mindful of which part of you is on the control panel, you
Yeah.
know um, operating your adult body, then you are more able to take a step back and respond in a better way.
Yeah. So I know that previously you were talking about this inner voice, and then I guess the little kid that is listening to it. It feels like that inner voice is almost a way in which that we can reparent ourselves by kind of um, changing what that voice looks like. It's interesting because when I talk to my clients, they're the ones that are often saying, yeah, and I'm saying like, this is what I'm thinking, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like, I've been talking to you for 5 months, it doesn't sound like you. So whose voice is that? And oftentimes that inner voice is either my mom or my dad, actually, that I've taken on as myself,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
And so I think also reparenting is about taking, as you said, that control panel back and taking control of that voice and talking to ourselves a little bit differently. And I don't think it's like I'm going to change some of the thoughts that unintentionally come in. It's about being able to step back and understand, are those really my thoughts?
Yes. Being aware of which part is you and which part is not. And when
Yeah.
you're deep into the reparenting work, you are able to recognize this is not me. So I'm
Yeah.
going to take a step back, take a breather, and I'm going to respond from my essence, from
Yeah.
who I truly am. And that takes practice. And you actually can create a dialogue. You can actually connect and build a relationship and have conversations with those parts of you.
Yeah. So it's interesting because a lot of people out there that are listening, I don't even think that they may not know how to tap into their inner child, right? I think for a lot of us, it's scary, right? We don't want to go there. It means a lot of shit that I'm going to have to dig through that I don't want to. I'm successful. I have a great car, a great home. I have a lovely dog on my side. And I don't want to have to go through all of that. It feels like so much. How can we tap into our inner child, that little girl inside? Hold on. How can we how can we tap into that inner child, that little girl inside, right? Are there, I don't want to say easier ways to do it, but ways in which it may not feel like as intense or as scary?
Um, the best thing to do is when you're starting out learning how to do inner child work, it's best to work with someone who can support you and who can create a safe container for you that you know you that you feel that you're safe and you're protected, because it's a lot of pain. It's a lot of pain and it's very, very, very scary.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
have more than one inner child. I would say inner children because we
Say more,
experience.
girl. Say more. What is this, girl? Now you got me sitting up, girl. Say more. Say more.
Well, you can have, the little 6-year old and then the 10-year-old and then the teen.
Yeah.
Like there are just so many, and every traumatic experience you have gets split into one part. So there could be many, many, many different parts depending on, how much trauma you have lived through and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
much that's left unprocessed. I've had clients that give their inner children names. They
Mm.
have different names. I typically have a lot of clients who have more than one inner children, and some of them are even preferred to be called they, to be referred to as they,
Mm-hmm.
rather than they have different pronouns. It's just like you're treating it as they are a real person.
Entity. Yeah.
Yes.
Person. I love that. It's so interesting that you said that this work is so necessary to do in a very safe space and container. So in my program, 6 months, we do not touch anything as it relates to the inner child until month 5, because the connection that I have with my clients needs to be so secure before
Yeah.
we even get to that work. When I was first working, we would start to do a little bit of that work at the beginning, and we were not getting to where we needed to get to, right? And so I totally agree with you that that needs to happen when there is true safety in the relationship with you and another person talking about those things. That's why I think sometimes people will go to therapy and the therapist might want to talk about that stuff pretty immediately, and
Hmm.
there's so much more trust that needs to be engendered, right? So that that the work is actually done and not surface level. So I think you're so right on when it comes to that. I think, this reparenting and inner child work looks different for women of color or people of color. So can you speak more on that?
Yes, absolutely. As a daughter of an immigrant family, being Chinese, and coming here when I was 11, I had to abandon what I knew before in order to survive here. And I feel like for a lot of immigrants or minorities, we are living a life of survival,
Yeah.
or at least that's what our parents have experienced, that's what their parents have experienced. Survival is in the lineage, and that's what they teach onto our children. I was told that.
Yeah.
And as long as you can survive, it's all good.
Yeah.
You don't need anything else.
We there's food on the table, you got a roof over your head, there's water to clean your body, you're good.
Yes, your essential needs are met, nothing else matters. So when is and so for us, we are emotional beings,
Yes.
and we have to process things. And if we don't get the process, if we don't get to process, then everything gets stored up inside in our bodies, becomes a lot of pain and PTSD, and it manifests out into our outer external environment. So, and with colored and minorities, we also have this thing of like, we have to work really hard, much
Mhm.
harder than an average American,
Yeah.
because your skin color is different. I've been told that day one since I got here, is
Yeah.
that I am never going to be American. My skin color is Chinese, and that's how I will be seen. So don't ever even think about you fitting in. And
Yeah.
so for me to fit in, I had to abandon everything I knew before. And so there's culture abandonment,
Yeah.
there's betrayal, and there's a lot of abuse. There's substance abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abandonment. Even though sometimes these things are not intentional,
Yeah.
like I held a lot of anger towards my parents because I was emotionally neglected.
Most of us are, because
Yeah.
guess what? Both of our parents have to work.
Exactly.
Or we're growing up in a single parent household and that person has to work and they don't have the time to be truly with us, not
Exactly.
just in like actual time but like emotional time as well. It's much more difficult. It's not impossible. I'm
It's
not
very
like,
difficult.
it's very difficult to be emotionally present for your children if you're in a single parent household and you're working and you're doing everything else. And so I think that, and that's why I wanted to bring this up, because most of us are probably dealing with emotional neglect. And that is such an important thing to be aware of when you are starting to do this reparenting work. Because I think a lot of people will be like, I don't need that. I'm good. Like, I'm good. Like, look at me now. I'm good. No, girl, you're probably not good. And if you're already telling me that you're good, I know you're not good.
Exactly. 100%.
Right? No, totally, totally. So I just think you make such great points when it comes to really understanding all of the things that are surrounded around being someone of color and growing up in a minority household. I know for myself, we moved quite a bit. And so, what that meant, similar to you, is that I had to shed different layers of skin every time I moved, in different schools and finding new friends. And it's interesting because when that happens, um, even though you have to go out and make new friends, walls also come up too. Because
Absolutely.
in the back of your head, to your point about survival, I can't get too close to these people because I may go. I may go next year. I may go in 2 years. So I'm not gonna be fully close to this person. I'm not gonna truly connect, right, with an individual in these relationships because I don't know if they're going to be secure. And that's how, growing up in such a household can affect the way that you relate to other people. I think you're so on the money when it comes to that. I know that that was the case for me, and I think sometimes is also the case. And it's interesting too, because what you'll see also when like people of color start to get out on their own is that they'll they're so used to moving that they always want to move, even when if it relates to travel, right? That
Yes.
travel is also a representation of this habit that they've created to always move and always to be doing
Yes.
something else. I think we see on like Instagram and maybe Facebook, oh, she's always traveling, she's always going somewhere. Yeah, I'm sure going to Bali is really cool. Love it. Um, but I also want to understand why she's doing that, right? And if
Yes.
it's coming from a habitual place, it's important.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't think people really understand that this is
No.
what the inner child and the reparenting work is really all about, right?
Everything that we're doing in our adult life, if we don't do this work and integrate all the different parts of ourselves, we are operating like by different parts of ourselves
Yeah.
all the time. And this thing about traveling, I can tell you that this trauma of me moving to the United States when I was 11, um, the move was very sudden. I didn't have the opportunity or the space to process. And when I got here, I didn't know anyone. I didn't speak the language. The culture is completely different from what I was used to. So I had to start over. And so I moved a lot. I I did that to myself. Whenever I would get close to someone, I'd just go. I'd
Yeah.
leave. I moved to New York, I moved to Europe, I moved back to the States, and I
Yes.
abandoned friendships because I get too close. I'm like, "Ooh, I need to pull back." And I had no idea I was doing any of this until,
Mm-hmm.
I did the parenting where it was like, "Oh, that's right. My inner child, that part of
Mm-hmm.
me is afraid of getting hurt again."
Yeah.
So, unconsciously, I'm doing all of these things without realizing.
Same,
Traveling,
sis.
same.
Same, same. I think
Yeah.
there's one point in my life where I had 10 different addresses in 10 years. A mess, just a
I was
hot
close.
ass mess. Yeah, yeah. That's it's interesting, right? The
Yeah.
similarities that we have. It doesn't matter if you're Black or Chinese. Like, this is why it's like women of color will have a different experience, and like that just means that this reparenting work is so important, right? For you to
Very.
really kind of know all of yourself. Yeah,
Yes. And one more thing about women of color. We are all victims of patriarchy,
yeah.
but women of color really are victims of patriarchy. And
And how does that affect the inner child? Or how do we kind of how do how do we understand that as we grow up, right? I'm interested to get your thoughts on that because I think
yeah,
sometimes it gets ingrained and we don't even know, and then we just start living our lives as if this is just how like this is, right? Versus not even having any sort of like thought process around it. What are your experiences or thoughts around that?
we don't think when we're living. We're pretty much on autopilot.
Yeah.
Once we reach adulthood, we are on autopilot. We travel to fulfill a void. We look for partners who can reparent ourselves, right? Who can
Yeah.
fill a void. So, and when it comes to patriarchy, is women of color. I mean, from my personal experience, um, my dad was the man of the house. He makes all the rules and we have to abide and we can't object. And we're women and we have to do all the housework.
Mm-hmm.
Just this like the very basic stuff, but it's so insidious. It seeps into everything that if you don't start asking questions, then you will continue to live like this. And if you don't start asking questions, you would have no idea there's a different way of being, there's a
Yeah.
different way of living. And this also has to do with decolonization work.
Yeah.
So this is an ongoing work, that because the programming is so deep and it's gone on for generations and generations and generations, that it's natural for us to be this way. We don't
Yeah.
even ask,
Yeah.
we have no idea.
I'm
So
so glad that you brought that up too, because
yeah,
just to add on top of that, because it is so hard for men of color in the world and society, what they will do is that they will have a smile on their face in the public and then bring all of their resentment and anger back home. And so, as children, we have to actually absorb it for ourselves and absorb it for our mothers.
yeah,
And that is really difficult to do. One, because the model is that because my dad is doing this, this is what love means. So when I
exactly.
see love like that out there when I'm dating, that's gonna look familiar to me, and
Yes.
I'm gonna be attracted to that because that's what I saw at home.
Exactly. You always go for what you're familiar with is because that's what makes you safe. Even if you lived through abuse and your home was not a safe place, you will still seek that out because that is what you're used to. Like me, I mean, have I've had and I still have, not 100% healed, but I have issues with men because of my relationship with my father,
Yes.
and
Everyone that's listening to this probably is in the same boat, and the host as well. Yeah, yeah. But I'm so glad that you admitted that, right? Because I think that more of us need to do that. More of us need to acknowledge why we may have interesting relationships with men in general and connecting that to our fathers without this shame or stigma of having daddy issues. Guess
yeah,
what? Everyone has daddy issues and everyone has mommy issues. Okay.
there you go.
Now that that's out of
Exactly.
the way.
Yes, this is the first thing that's very important is you have to be able to be kind and compassionate to yourself.
Yeah.
And the biggest step is to see and accept and understand that you have issues and where these issues come from and why they're here and why you do things the way you do, why you react to things, the way you react. You have to see it. You really have to see it and understand and accept that is a part of you.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away. All you can do is to manage it better.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love that. Because I think that's really important. If you're not acknowledging it, you're not even in the game.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
that's the
do want
first
to
thing.
say about patriarchy, I do
Yeah,
want to say that men are also victims of patriarchy,
yeah,
especially colored men, because they are taught to, they can't be emotional. They have to be macho. They have to be strong.
yeah,
And so they have been told to shut out that emotional part of themselves. And that's also very painful.
yeah. Um, you had mentioned earlier about triggers and how that I think is a really good, interesting roadmap to our inner child or children.
How many children do you have?
Girl, I don't know. I was just thinking about it, girl. I'm like, maybe I've been neglecting a couple of children that I've had that I haven't really been able to really think about. Um, so I'm literally going to do a thought download of all of the different children. But I think this is actually a really good exercise that we all can do, right? Like to literally, start from 5 and 6 and go every 4 years. And because you're a different person every 4 years when you're a child. So like 6, 10, 14, and 18, and understand what part of yourself really wasn't fulfilled. What needs did you have at that time that you didn't, that you had that were not fulfilled, or something that you needed that wasn't able to be given to you, right? And that could be a variety of different things.
So
I think,
many.
yeah, yeah, but it's such a really great way to think about it, because I think
Mhm.
you hear inner child and you're like, okay, I think
What's
about
that?
what I am as a child, right? And I think most of
Yeah.
us think about like anywhere from 6 to 8, 6 to 8, 6 to 9. Sometimes we ignore
No.
the teenage years, which I
Oh
think are
gosh,
actually so important, because
very
that's when we're a
important.
little bit more conscious, and like that's when the real resentment can start to come up and
Yes.
exude out of our pores.
So much anger in
Yeah, yeah.
teenagers.
No, so I wanna encourage everyone out there to do that exercise, like I'm going to do. And if you feel like sharing it with me, please send it to anwar@getyourguycoaching.com and we'll
I
talk
would.
about it. Yeah, so let's talk about triggers. What are your thoughts? How are you thinking about them exactly? And how can we use them, and maybe like the way that our bodies react to our triggers, to connect with our inner child?
Well, usually we see triggers are all other people, other, circumstances. Like this person triggered me, that person triggered me, or this thing happened today, it really triggered me. But actually, there are no triggers on the outside.
That's right.
There are no triggers on the outside. Triggers is just, it's an illusion. It's anything that happens on the outside, it's a mirror that reflects that primary wound that you have experienced, and it causes a reaction from, your inner child's unmet needs. And so usually for the inner child, um, the typical needs are, who am I? Do you love me? Do you see me? Do I belong? Am I worthy? These five are the typical basic needs that causes all these wounds, like emotional neglect, not being heard, not being seen, can't be who they really are throughout childhood, and have to create this like a totally different personality so that they can survive. So every time you feel triggered, you tune in with yourself and you ask yourself, what do you need? Right?
Wait, can you repeat those five again? Because I think it's so important for us. And I think it's a really great framework to think about something. If I'm being triggered, one of these questions, right, is actually needs to be answered in a more legitimate way. So could you repeat those five for us again?
Sure thing. Who am I? Do you love me? Or am I loved? Am I seen? Do I belong? Am I worthy?
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. Amazing. I love it so much. For us coaches, we geek out on this kind of stuff all
I
the
know.
time.
It's
New
super
and different frameworks to think
excited.
about things.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I love it so much. It's so good. Um, okay, how can we, we've talked a lot about the inner child, but girl, we're grown ass people now. Right? So, like, how can we integrate in a productive way, right, the inner child with our adult selves
This
to
it's
help us heal, right? Not just,
yeah.
right? This is all about our natural healing.
Yes, this is an ongoing work. To integrate the inner child, first you have to recognize the inner child, and then to accept the inner child, and to be accountable of the inner
What
child.
does that mean?
Being accountable of the inner child means that you have to be accountable of, you take back the responsibilities of changing your life, making changes in your life. Because what we do naturally is that we hold resentment and we think that we are being hurt. So we expect the other person to change, the
Mm,
circumstances to change, because we
yes.
feel like we're entitled. But in reality, is that the only thing that we can change is ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that can make us change is ourselves. So without recognizing and accepting that ugly part, let's say ugly part of ourselves that we've
Mm-hmm.
been hiding for so
Yeah.
long, we won't be, we will not do this work. We have to accept that part first.
Yeah. It's so important. Now, do you have any exercises that we can do that will help us in this work?
I can a lot of self-love. So whenever you feel low, whether, anytime during the day, or you can do this daily, weekly, whatever, if your inner critic gets in, or you're just being cruel to yourself, because we all know that we can be very cruel to ourselves, you take a breath, and you sit down, and you ask yourself, what are the three things that you did today that you're pleased with? And how do you plan to celebrate them? And make an act to celebrate them.
So when we are, let's say, kind of in our heads, right? Maybe even spiraling. What you're saying is to really kind of reframe it and to think about some of the things that you said you either accomplished or you're happy about, right?
Yes.
And then think about ways of celebrating them and then actually celebrate them. Can you
Yes.
give examples of like how we can celebrate like things that we're proud of? I know it seems like a simple question, but I think sometimes people will be like, I'm saying this because I know my clients and I have to force them to celebrate their accomplishments. Everything is like on the to-do list and they just check it off and go to the next, right?
That's the
And so,
thing.
yeah,
That's what we're taught to do. We're also victims of capitalism.
yeah.
Um, so
And just FYI, if you haven't noticed, my girl is in the Bay Area. So yes, capitalism, yes, decolonization, yes, patriarchy. Girl, you are wearing your Bay Area quite well. And I'm
I
so
am
proud.
it's very potent here.
Yes, yes, yes. As someone that was formerly in the Bay Area, I am feeling at home. Thank you for this.
We're not very good at taking care of ourselves and celebrating
Mm.
ourselves. And it could be something really, really small. Like, for example, um, last week, I had an appointment and it didn't went very well, right? So it didn't go very well. And immediately I was really focused on that. Like, oh, I didn't do so good. Oh, I suck. And, all these cruel things I can say to myself. And
Yeah.
before you know it, I'm like limping around and feeling really hopeless and
Mm.
feeling low about myself. But then, I decided, no, this is bullshit. Excuse my language, but
No, tell it like it is, girl.
I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about other things that I did. How about I am preparing to be on this podcast I just got invited on,
Yes.
and I just got a new client, or I just finished doing my monthly offerings. It could be something really, really small. And then it's like, how do you want to celebrate that, Gia? You know, um, you can do anything you want. You can go out for a nice walk. Those of you who like to take walks, you can treat yourself to a delicious meal.
Or a
Um,
dessert too. I love candy and
yeah,
ice cream.
yeah, go for it. Candy and ice cream. I'm a chocolate kind of girl, so
Okay. Well, girl.
chocolate.
Girl, stay away from me, girl.
Buy yourself something nice.
Yes.
Buy yourself something
Yeah.
nice. Take a nice bath, book a trip for yourself. Go away
Yeah.
for a day, 2 days.
Yeah.
You are
Treat
allowed.
yourself. Treat
Yes,
yourself.
in
That's what
any
it's
way
about.
you want. And, you also want to ask your inner children, like, what can I give you?
Mm.
Indulge yourself.
Yeah.
Indulge yourself is the
Yeah.
most important. We're so good at indulging others, but we have no idea how to indulge ourselves. So the most important thing I want to say to everyone is that you turn all the love that you're pouring out to the outside and to another, you turn all of that love inside
Yeah.
to yourself.
I love this so much because I think sometimes we can get stuck in trying to treat ourselves as adults. And the things that actually will let our souls rise is being able to treat our inner child or children, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I love that so much. And if you're having issues trying to think about that, think about the things that you love to do between the ages of 8 and 12. And I ask this question of so many women and clients of mine, and you have 2 or 3 things that you already know, right? When I say that, what you love to do, and find a way to represent that today, right?
Yes. And what have you always wanted to do, but you haven't gotten a chance to for
Yeah.
whatever reason? Like, I really want to try this, but I was told that I would never, like a lot of these things, do it.
Yeah.
No shame, no guilt, just have fun. You are here. We're all here having fun.
Yeah.
Life is fun.
I love it.
Like, there's no need to take anything so seriously, right?
Yeah, so true. So usually when I have my guests on, I ask them how they got their guy. But in this episode, I want to ask you how you got your inner child. What were those things that were super, super critical for you to really tap into her?
I learned how to love her. I listened. I really learned to listen. I listened to her pain. I listened to her stories. And I always told her that I'm here. I showed her my presence and I showed her my non judgment. Anything that she wanted to express, and this is important, is that the inner child, your inner children might want to say a lot of things to say, and none of them are really pleasant, to be honest. Let them have the floor.
Yeah,
Maybe it's going to last for an hour. Maybe it's going to last for a couple of days. Maybe it's going to last for a week. Let them have the floor. Non judgment. You might move through your day a little bit harder, but it's just how it is. Like, I learned to give my inner children the space to be who they are. And thus, I created a trust with them. And so we're still deepening our relationship.
yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Now, for my listeners who want to learn more about how they can truly reparent themselves, how can they connect with you?
Well, they can contact me at Gia, that's JIA,
Uh-huh.
at consciouslybe.life.
Okay, girl. Consciously B as in the letter or BEE?
BE.
Oh, B as in we are. B to
Yeah.
be. Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's
Gia
consciously be.
at consciouslyb.life.
Life, LIFE.
Oh my God.
And
Consciously be life, girl. I love it.
yes, and also starting next month, every second Tuesday, I'm offering a guided Meet Your Inner Child journey. It's going to be online, and yeah, I will be there to hold space for whoever is interested in meeting and connecting with their inner children.
I love that so much. We will have that link in the show notes so that you can connect onto it and just have a sacred, safe space for your inner child or children. I am so happy that you're offering that, Gia. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so
Mm.
grateful for you and your work and you spending the time with us to talk much deeper about this work than is normally talked about. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you.
You're so
An
welcome.
honor. It's been an honor.
Thank you. All right, my loves. This shit was real. It is very real and it is very necessary. And I just want to say that if you're really serious about getting clarity around your love life and relationship, you can't skip this part. You have to actually feel through this. It is so important that you do that so that you can not just have a relationship, because you can get one tomorrow. This is about finding someone and being someone who can be in a healthy, long lasting, communicative, safe relationship. And if that is something that you want, I want to encourage you to reach out to Gia or reach out to myself as it relates to your love life so that you can start to um, have a metamorphosis, right, of the way that you are going to show up in the world and how you are going to consciously be life. All right, my loves. I talk to you soon. Love, 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 love you. Bye.